My topic is related to obesity and insulin resistance and the role of inositols. First of all, I want to tell you all that inositol is there in our body, and if you go a little bit into the basics, you'll realize that inositols are present in a huge volume in the brain. So, if you can correlate to the workshop yesterday, what Professor Sarah was talking about, in the evolution of PCOS, there's a lot to do with the brain. So, I thought maybe inositols that the brain cells convert them, the glucose into inositols, all this I felt it very interesting. So now, from yesterday, we have been talking about evidence, etc. Evidence is one part is the publications, the research papers, etc. But there are so many other parts to the evidence as well. And I think whenever there's something new in the market, we are a little bit hesitant to make use of it. But once it becomes a little old, then more and more people are using it. So, insulin resistance, we all know, is very common in obese women. And what does this patients with insulin resistance, they have inability to lose weight, constant hunger, craving for sugar, migrating aches and pains, fatigue, all that makes them obese. And then this insulin resistance makes a hormonal imbalance, and that is mostly seen in PCOS subjects. So now we all know that insulin resistance is a risk factor for diabetes mellitus type 2, and it is also seen around 5 to 10 fold higher in women with PCOS than in the healthy women. Now, 50 to 70% of women with PCOS do have insulin resistance, and this insulin resistance and complementary hyperinsulinemia that we see, that can be really triggered by obesity and visceral fat accumulation. And now, in approximately 80% of the women with PCOS with obesity, this insulin resistance is seen. But you have to remember that it's also seen in nearly half the percentage, that's about 30 to 40% of lean PCOS as well. Now, as I told you, inositol is found in the body, but the inositol that is marketed is known as myoinositol, and this is nothing but a carbon sugar alcohol, which is, as I told you, already present in the body. The sugar, the inositol is converted into glucose, and it is indeed a pride fact that in India we found uh, inositol in bougainvillea leaves way back in 2010, and then it is also found in the food, like many of the dry fruits and grapefruit, some leafy vegetables, beans, almonds, walnuts, etc. And it is a known fact that myoinositol is used in psychiatric conditions, and when we use in psychiatric conditions, it is used in a very high dose, more than 4 grams. But in our scenario, in PCOS and infertility, we use a much lower dose, that is about 2 grams. And it is known to be anxiolytic. That's another good effect of myoinositol. Now, today somebody was asking that why we cannot measure inositol because it's very expensive, etc. But there are studies which show the urinary clearance of inositols, and here when you look at the urinary clearance of inositol, there's 5 times more in cases of PCOS subjects when compared to the normal subjects. And here, once again, you have to be, it's very clear that DCI, dichloroinositol, is more seen to be, generally more of clearance of that than the myoinositol. So, in PCOS women, a vicious cycle is initiated whereby the insulin resistance is amplified through the induction of a defect in the renal clearance of dichloroinositol. Now let's understand the pathway of inositol deficiency and PCOS. So what happens is initially there is a deficiency of inositol, then because of that there's a decreased PI3 kinase activity, that is phosphatidyl inositol 3 kinase, which is very important, and then because of that there's insulin resistant and hyperinsulinemia, and then it leads to the PCOS and its consequences. So the main pathological contributor in PCOS could be inositol deficiency. So now we have to understand that the dichloroinositol deficiency at the peripheral level. So what happens is because of the dichloroinositol deficiency, there is insulin resistance, and then there are two actions. One is hyperinsulinemia, which then leads to metabolic diseases. The other one is hyperandrogenemia, which gives rise to acne and hirsutism in our adolescent patients. Now, regarding the inositol for management of PCOS, that both the two isomers, myoinositol and dichloroinositol, are proven to be insulin mediators. So let us know a little bit of myoinositol. It is linked to cellular glucose uptake. So that's important. We need to know where really this myoinositol comes into play. And it is at a higher concentration in the ovaries, and it is present also in the follicular fluid, and it improves the ovulatory function. And whenever we have a deficiency of this myoinositol, it leads to poor oocyte quality, and then this is for infertility purposes. I've just taken it because they're interrelated. Now, dichloroinositol is present in high concentration in glycogen storage tissues such as liver, muscles, and fat. So it's different. Myoinositol it's different, and dichloro is different, and it is mainly linked to the glycogen synthesis. It rapidly reduces peripheral hyperinsulinemia, and deficiency of dichloroinositol leads to insulin resistance. So the dose of dichloroinositol, that's what we are going to stress here, that has to be adequate. Now, the myoinositol improves the ovulatory function, and dichloro rapidly reduces the peripheral hyperinsulinemia. So that is beneficial in our adolescent PCOS. So now, when we administer our patients of PCOS myoinositol, the overall actions are that there's a decreased hyperinsulinemia, increased insulin sensitivity, reduced severity of acne and hirsutism. That's what we take into account when these adolescent PCOS patients are there. Then also there is a decreased free and total testosterone, improved pregnancy and live birth rate, that is because of the myoinositol, and then restored menstrual cycle and maintained ovulation, reduced insulin resistance, improved glucose utilization. So these are all the various benefits that we have with the administration of myoinositol. Now, comparison with currently available treatment, what do we give? We give oral contraceptives, we give metformin, we also give sometimes these thiazolidins and pioglitazone, etc. But then there are a lot of side effects with all these medicines, and then when we compare that with myoinositol and dichloroinositol, or a combination of myoinositol and dichloroinositol, we see that all those side effects are not there. So because these side effects are not there and these drawbacks are not there, now inositols have really gained interest in the management of insulin resistance and PCOS. Actually, from the region where I practice, that is Gujarat, Ahmedabad, a huge number of PCOS patients are there, and it's every other person is a diabetic there. Maybe the dietary habits or the geographical situation, whatever may be the reason, but then because of that I have started a special PCOS clinic, and I realized the difficulties when these small girls come. So many girls come from the university, colleges and schools, so we need some molecules, good molecules to give them, and that's why my interest in this subject. Now, This is a very small study. I think Dr. Manjari also had told in the morning, so I will not repeat it. And that improved the endocrine parameters with myoinositol and dichloroinositol. And what this, even though this was a very small study, but then this saw the effect in endocrine and metabolic parameters, and there was a reduction in LH free testosterone fasting insulin HOMA index. That's fantastic. Then metabolic parameters also reduced, and also the DHEAS, SHBG, and androstenedione also reduced. As I told you, myoinositol is abundant in the diet, but not dichloroinositol. So the average 1,800 calorie diet contains about 1,300 milligrams of myoinositol. So as I already told you, the various fruits and nuts which are abundant in myoinositol. Now, what happens, there is a research which suggests that many women with PCOS compromise the conversion of myoinositol to dichloroinositol. This is very important because the dichloroinositol is converted by myoinositol, but what happens in these patients is that this skyloinositol, that ephemerase activity is not there. Because of that, there's no conversion. And so because of the decreased ephemerase activity, the inhibit conversion of myoinositol to dichloroinositol. So now this hypothesis which says that if we administer uh, lower doses of myoinositol maybe suffice if we co-administer with dichloroinositol, and the ratio may be less important. So ultimately, what this study says is that we have to give both myoinositol and dichloroinositol, but the amount has to be, the quantity has to be, so much that it will be effective in these patients. I'll come to it a little later. So in healthy condition, the myoinositol and dichloroinositol ratio is 100 is to 1, and in PCOS subjects the ratio is 0.2 is to 1. So you can just imagine the difference. So the ideal therapeutic dose of dichloroinositol is 300 milligram to 600 milligram per day. So the dosage of myoinositol is 550. That means 40 is to 1, that would be very insufficient. So we need to give a better ratio. Now, what is the right combination? The right combination will be myoinositol 550 milligrams and dichloroinositol 150 milligram, and this is the core therapy in the management of PCOS. So now the insulin paradox, here you have at periphery insulin. This is important as far as the adolescent girls is concerned. The left hand side, the insulin resistant, which because of the reduced epimerase gives reduced myoinositol to DCI conversion, and then because of that there's a uh, diinositol DCI insufficiency, and then we will have a improved insulin sensitivity, and that will lead to normal insulin level. And then again, at the ovary level we also have good effects, but we are not interested in that. So myoinositol will act on ovary, good oocyte, etc., but DCI will improve insulin sensitivity at the periphery, leading to normal insulin level, thereby the vicious cycle of insulin resistant and hyperandrogenism in PCOS. So there's a Spanish evidence to say which is the right dose. I've just simplified into that into, you can see the red one, that's the right dose. So the right dose is MI 550 milligrams plus DCI 150 milligrams, and that is the right dose of DCI. And this was again, this sample size is very small. And what I would request all of you, we Indians have huge number of cases. Let's all start really publishing our work, that load of work that we do, so that we don't have to rely more on the Western, because it may be a little difficult, our genes, our diet, etc. So it's not that we do not have evidence. We do have evidence, but most of these papers, they have a very small size. So, myoinositol is also very effective in some of the cutaneous disorders which trouble our girls, and so it this is again, as I told you, a very small study where they have shown that acne and hirsutism disappeared in 53% and 30% of PCOS women respectively after myoinositol and folate treatment. So these are all very, simple treatment, and we can have really good. What comes to my simple mind is, when something is there already in our body, why can't we give a little more and help this patient? I even tell my IVF patients also, when they are very scared to take the gonadotropins, I tell them FSH and LH is there in our body, so you don't have to be too much worried. So a little bit of comparison of myoinositol with metformin. The conclusion is that the myoinositol acts at the level of insulin receptors and is effective in treatment of hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance, which is underlying factor leading to the development of polycystic ovary syndrome. So, according to these studies, what they say is the HOMA index, which is measurement of insulin resistance, decreased in the myoinositol group significantly, but not in the metformin group. Believe me, I am a great fan of metformin as well. I have been using from a long time, because metformin is an old molecule. We really have to respect it. But then there may be some molecules which are at par, or maybe now we will realize they may be better in some of the conditions. So one comparison between the two group, myoinositol had significantly better action in improving the insulin resistance. Myoinositol also had better patient compliance and well tolerated than that we can all agree. Many of the patients with metformin have gastrointestinal problems, loose motions, and they do not feel all right with metformin, etc. But with myoinositol and dicaro, such problems are not there. So, to summarize, dear friends, insulin resistance along with hyperinsulinemia affects approximately around 50% of PCOS patients, both lean and obese. And myoinositol and dichloroinositol play an important role. And side effects of OC pills and insulin, metformin is not there. And the deficiency of dichloroinositol in metabolic organs leads to insulin resistance, require a therapeutic dose, that's important, of DCI to control. Correction of myoinositol and dichloroinositol deficiency simultaneously will help improving metabolic, menstrual, ovulatory, and hyperandrogenic features of PCOS. And so, last but not the least, the therapeutic dosage of DCI is more than 300 milligram, and MI is 1 to 4 gram per day. So the same old thinking, the same old results. Small changes eventually add up to huge results. Life is a matter of choices, and every choice you make makes you. So Deepika is to like Ranveer, but then that was metformin. Then Ranveer has come. So Mayo and D Cairo. Once again, life is a matter of choice, and every choice you makes you. Now we have to relate to newer things in life. So, hey Alexa, Mayo, Cairo, and what's the ratio? She will tell you all. So, dear friend, these are my books. I specifically kept this one because there's one book on decoding polycystic ovarian syndrome. If anybody interested, kindly write to me. I'll facilitate. Thank you, chairpersons. Thank you.